This is the third session that we're going to be discussing objectives. First session, we talked about what's in here, how do we prepare, what are the kinds of things that we should be thinking about when setting objectives for the year. Second session, which was last one, was what's an actual good mechanism that we could use to deploy objectives, to share them with our teams, to think about them in a way that we can make them SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And we discussed OGSM as a viable methodology that's used by pretty large companies. I personally used that at Procter & Gamble during many years, very, very successfully, and this is the standard for that company. Maybe I'm out of date, but I think that they're still using that. And we also talked about OKRs, which were really, really used to huge advantage at Google. They were embedded in Intel by Andy Grove. So we spoke about that last time. And today I want to focus on how to make sure that whatever you deployed actually gets done. But before we go there, let me remind you, Eduardo Lopez here. I founded VSharp. What I do is I'm hired by finance professionals who feel like their careers have stalled. They're ambitious, they're growing fast, they're doing great. All of a sudden they feel stuck. They feel their careers have stalled a little, and I'm brought in to help them think through their strategy, break through that barrier, get them promoted, get earmarked for more promotions and fast growth in 2 years or less guaranteed. And this is a series, going back to the video, that is focused on the objectives. My belief is you cannot achieve something great, or for sure not on a consistent basis, unless you have a plan. Right, my friend? So unless you have a good idea of what it is you're trying to accomplish, by when you will be done, how do you know that you're there? How do you measure if whatever you got is good enough? All of those things are important. And as you go, you need to make sure that, I believe that one of the things that are most important about objectives is they're not just your objectives, they're the objectives of your team. So not your objectives, your team's objectives. You're all in this together. And in this vein, the most important thing that you need to consider when you deploy, as you try to execute on them, as you deliver on your objectives, is, does everybody in my team know what they need to know, and what they need to do, and when they need to do it, and why they need to do it? It's super important, in my view, that everybody in your organization has a complete view of the big picture. Everybody, regardless of their role. It could be somebody who's just, stapling papers together, to the most important strategic head of your company. Everybody should know how what they're doing is furthering the strategic intent of your organization. So that's super important, that you have a total clarity on how your contribution is moving the needle forward. So that's extremely important. And that's what I wanted to touch upon today. Let me share with you my screen, because there's something that I want you to see. Hang on, let me make sure that I have the right slide to show you. And hopefully this will be self-evident, I would hope. So there we go. So last time we touched on, let me share my screen here. Okay. So that's my Zoom screen, sorry about that. And this is what we touched on last time. The goals, right? So what's the importance of the goals? I'm going to zoom right through here. And we also talked about, like I said a second ago, OGSMs, objectives, goals, strategies, and measures, and how they're cascaded, right? The first level of the company does objectives and goals, and those are the most strategic objectives. The goals are what the strategic intentions, initiatives mean in terms of quantifiable descriptions, so numbers. And then the strategies to accomplish the goals. What are the actual, how will you go about attaining these goals, these numbers? And in order for these strategies to be successful, you need to have key metrics. So as you see, it's a it's a more and more detailed look at what you're trying to do as you go down from the objectives to the actual measures, and with the goals and strategies in between. Now to the next level, you cascade down, your strategies and measures become their objectives and goals, and so on and so forth. The strategies and measures of that level become the objectives and goals of the next level, and so on, until it gets to the last level of the company, and everybody knows, like I was saying, what they are supposed to be doing and how what they do moves the needle forward. We talked about having at least one breakthrough objectives, at least 2 organizational objectives, and then the balance to make 5 you would do as an operational objective. Obviously, depending on circumstances, you might need to choose whether you want to do 2 organizational and 2 breakthrough and 1 operational, or always 1 breakthrough at least, and then the rest of the combination with organizational and operational in the way that best makes sense for your situation. But this is a notional indication, and a strong point that I'm making, that you should always have, if you want to grow your career, if you want to make a difference, if you want to move that needle forward, you always need to have at least 1 breakthrough objective. Now let's talk about the 12th quarter year, right? In reality, it's 3 years, as you can see here in the slide. Year 1 in its 4th quarters, year 2, year 3, and you have 12 quarters. So imagine that each of these quarters is a month. And we also touched on this in the 2nd session, where we discussed briefly the 12th quarter year. And the importance of this is, if you think about the longer term of what your company is trying to accomplish, and if you understand that, and if you know what your team does and how your team contributes, then you can start to think about the longer term view. What do you want to have accomplished at the end of the 3rd year here? And then you reverse engineer it from the 12th quarter back down to the 1st quarter, which is where we are now, actually. So once you have your quarters, once you have your quote unquote 3 sections of the 12th quarter year, then you start to break that down, and then you say, okay, so in the first 4 months, again, quote unquote, in these 4 months, what will you want to accomplish to get to the end of this year? Well, those are quarters. Then you go into the quarter and you break that down into months, the month into weeks, the week into days, and the day into hours. And that's the important thing. You only get what you measure. So once you start to break down your objectives into years, then into quarters, then into months, then into weeks, and then into days, this is super important, my friend. If I were to walk to your desk and ask you to show me your calendar, what I would like to see is something that just by looking at your calendar, I could know, okay, this is what John is working on. This is what Jane is working on. So it should be that evident. You should protect time to go and do something that's very specific, that is included in your objectives for the week, for the day, for the week, for the month, for the quarter, for the year, for the 3 years. So you should always be every day moving the needle forward on your objectives, so that by the end of the year, you will have accomplished what it was you wanted. I cannot emphasize this enough. Life happens. With life come distractions. And you have things at home, you have things, false urgencies from your boss or from other stakeholders. We're human, we want our stuff quickly, right? And many times people make up urgencies to get you to give them what they need quickly. Well, you need to be very critical. You need to be very selective. What is it you want to spend your precious time on? And the best way to do that is, first, set aside protected blocks of time in your daily calendar. Review that the previous night to make sure that in your day you have activities that are going to get you closer to achieving your objectives for the day, for the week, for the month, for the year, for the 3 years. Okay? Super important. Please don't disregard this. And if you need to go back to your objectives when we're done, and make sure that that's exactly what you're doing, that you have a very good idea of how you're moving the needle, and that you have specific sets of blocks of time allocated, to move the needle forward and get and achieve things that help you accomplish your objectives. Super important. You plan, you measure, you get it. All right, now let's move on with the rest part of the session today. And I want to make up for some of the time that I caused you to lose here with my technical issues. There are a few things to consider. Let me get a drink here. Actually, you know what, my friend? I'm sorry. Give me one quick second. I need to stop sharing, and I'll share again in a minute. Less than a minute, of course. I just want to make sure that I don't misuse your time. And so I want to set a good, clear, visible timer for myself here. And then I'll share my screen again. Okay, so let's go back to where we were. And let me share my screen once more. All right. All of that interruption, terrible. Well, that's part of being alive. So think about the following as you're thinking of deploying your objective. As you're thinking to make sure that your team is geared up, is aligned, is working towards a good delivery of your objectives. Create a plan to monitor your objectives. How are you going to monitor them? How often? What's the mechanism? Are you going to do one-on-ones? Are you going to do team meetings? Are you going to do stand-up meetings? Define very clearly, not only for yourself and not only for you to know, but for your team. Everybody needs to know how you will be monitoring their objectives. And this is not in a policing kind of way. It's in a supportive kind of way. Your job as the leader is to help your teammates be successful, members of your organization, achieve what they set out to accomplish, because that's going to move you forward. So make sure that there's a good understanding of how you're going to be monitoring their progress so you can help them. I was saying, define what are the routines. Are you going to have a weekly stand-up meeting? Are you going to have a bi-weekly? Are you going to have a one-on-one? All of the above. How are you going to do that? Agree and align and communicate that to your team. There's got to be feedback loops. So if a very crude example would be you tell somebody, or you're told by somebody, to walk in a certain direction. Unless you stop and turn around and take stock of where you are and make sure that you're really walking down that line that you were told to walk, or conversely, that your team member is walking down that line that you told them to walk on, if you don't check, if you don't correct, if you don't verify, you might just end up in some other town, in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of the jungle, everywhere but where you want to go. So you need a feedback loop to make sure that as you go, you're getting to the right place. You need to talk. You need to have good communication mechanisms, because how are you going to adjust and course correct in case something needs changing? Leverage technology. There's many project management tools, obviously electronic scheduling platforms, data analysis platforms. How are you going to use technology to set the objectives, to track progress, to communicate with your team members, to reflect the adjustments, to go and research whatever it is you're going to have to research to accomplish your objectives? All of that needs to be set up in advance. Monitoring objectives, making sure that you're properly deploying objectives, is one of the best opportunities that you will have to engage your employees. Let me say that again. Do you hear me? Setting objectives and then tracking them and making sure that people deliver them are one of your best opportunities as a leader to engage, excite, and bring inspiration to your team. So don't waste it. Make sure that everybody knows what you're trying to accomplish. Make sure that they understand why. Make sure that they understand how. How does that play a role in what the company at large is trying to accomplish? This is key. The better you do this, the more engaged your team is going to be. Obviously, you're going to have to give them the resources. You're going to have to come to compromises if need be as to those resources. Maybe they need 8 people and you can only give them 3. but you need to have communication. That's so important. Along the same thought process of engagement, think about this. It's been scientifically proven that whenever a team or a person sees the end line, when you're inside of the goal, you're going to be far more effective, far more focused, far more successful than if you don't have an actual well-defined goal. Stands to logic, right? It resonates even with you. When you have a deadline, something that you need to deliver tomorrow, nothing's going to distract you. You're going to be laser focused on whatever it is you're trying to do. And that's the same rationale when the end line is there and it's visible. Your team are going to know what needs to be done, when it needs to be, when it needs to happen, and they're going to be super focused. So create early wins. Create many end lines across the way. This is one of the benefits and the beauties of the Scrum methodology. If you're not familiar with it, it's part of the lean management, let's say, philosophy to run your company, to deliver projects, which is mini sprints. You define a short-term goal and you go for it quickly, focused. You deliver on that, you go for the next one, and for the next one, and for the next one. Imagine what that's going to do for morale, for commitment, and for a feeling of accomplishment, not only in yourself, in the most important part of this whole thing, your team. They're going to be a lot more satisfied that they are helping you move the needle, that they are advancing, that they're growing. So think about that. Recognition, celebrate your victories, set up things such that you have many wins along the way, so that when you're in the third, fourth cycle, you can look back and you say, man, how far we've come. And you can celebrate that too. What does success mean? So if you give somebody a target, an objective, are you both on the same page in terms of delivering that objective? What you want to avoid is having a discussion at the end of the road where you think that your colleague, your team member, has met what you gave them to do and they think they have exceeded it. And that's a painful conversation to have. It's a difficult conversation to have. It's wasteful. I've had them because I've been guilty of this, where I didn't clarify going in what success meant, what good looks like, what success really looks like. And so I had team members who thought that they had exceeded above and beyond, and I was not in the same page. And that was a painful conversation. So save yourself that pain, save yourself that trouble. Align. What does success look like? We were saying communication is key, and feedback loops are important. And this is just essential to continuous improvement. How are you going to be making sure that based on the feedback that you get through that feedback loop, you continuously improve how you are going after your objectives? You probably need to course correct. How do you know if you need to actually get rid of a certain objective and come up with a new one to adapt to changing circumstances in your environment? It's super important that you have a methodology, something that you can work on with your team in a disciplined way that will allow you to be very, very agile, to adapt and be nimble. Nothing better for this than lean methodology and lean tools. So think about obeya rooms. Obeya rooms are war rooms. If there's something that crops up unexpectedly, well, why not get you and your team in a room and start analyzing the problem? Break it down using lean methods. 5 whys. PDCA, plan, do, check, act. What else can you do to get down into the roots of the problem as opposed to just start? Listen, imagine you're in a submarine and you spring a leak somewhere. You could spend the rest of your journey patching every single leak, trying to make sure that water's not coming out of the holes anymore. Or you can stop, try to understand what's causing the leaks, and fix that. So go for the cause of the sickness, don't just, give aspirin. That's kind of the essence here. So continuous improvement, teamwork, continuous realignment, course correct. This is not static. Life happens, reality happens, things are going to change. You're going to need to adjust. So make sure that you have the tools, the process, the understanding, and communication with your team. How are you going to handle conflicts, disconnects? If you think something needs to be done, your teammate misunderstood, how are you going to realign that? How are you going to resolve any potential discrepancy or even differences in style, in definitions of success? Maybe as you go, you start aligned, and as you go, you start to sort of identify different things that need to be done. Well, you need to be aligned. It might not be an easy conversation, but you need to have a good command of techniques to bring alignment to that situation. You as the leader own that. So make sure that you have a good communication in place and that you're able to identify and address disconnect. We spoke about the lean tools and the conflict resolution. And the last one that I'm going to say is we spoke about the frequent wins, early wins, celebrate victories. On the same vein, make sure that you fail early and often. Set up experiments as you go. Maybe you don't know how to accomplish your end objective, but you need to at least start to try something out. Did it work? How, why, and what are you going to change? Right? So those are experiments. Try something. If it doesn't work, learn from it. That's my last bullet there. Document it. What could you do different? So next time you set another experiment, you adjust what went wrong last time, and you identify something that you're going to do differently. So that as you go, you're building knowledge, you're building learning, you're building growth. So those are a few things, my friend, that I wanted to tackle. We're at the bottom of the hour, and I know that I delivered a little bit of a shorter session today. My fault, because I had all of these issues. I want to stop here because this is an important slide that I wanted to walk you through today. Make sure, again, before we break and we wrap up here, let me recap some of the things that we discussed. Think about yourself as you go into the year. Do not neglect your own well-being. Do not neglect yourself. Make sure that you set aside some time for exercise, for good sleep, time with family, time with your hobbies, whatever it is you do outside of work. Set time aside for that. Same for your team. Create a culture of inclusion, of participation. Everybody should feel empowered. Everybody should feel part of success. Everybody should feel part of the effort. Make sure that your team communicate. So those are things that are important before you start doling out objectives and giving people things to do. Make sure that you yourself establish a culture that's going to be a growth mindset culture. We are not born with the knowledge that we have, and that's it. We can learn. And that's something that you as a leader need to exemplify for your team. We, in this team, learn. We don't know it all, but we learn, and we can get better, and we will get better. And we might fail, but we're going to learn from that. We just discussed that piece. Second, what we covered a little while ago that I already gave you a quick recap here, OGSM as a mechanism. There's more. I'm not trying to say this is the end-all be-all. There's more, but this is a viable methodology. You define your strategic objectives at the company level, or the company does, and you need to understand, even if they don't define it in the same language, what does that mean? How are the company trying to accomplish this strategic intent here? What are the goals? How are they measuring that? How do you think the next level is going to try to do? What does that mean for them? So if they have their strategic intent, the company at the company level at the top, and their goals, so there are some measures, how are they going to go and accomplish these numbers? How are they going to know if each of these actions is being successful. You need to measure that. And you need to carry on this exercise. Again, even if your company doesn't use OGSMs as such, I'm pretty sure you can understand what they want to accomplish, what that means in terms of numbers. And you can do the exercise of bringing that down to the level of your team or the level above, where you can affect them. You can have an impact on them. And this is a fantastic opportunity for you to liaise, to have relationships, to reach out and network with other leaders. Have them help you understand that strategy so you can translate that for yourself and for your teams. And at some point, it'll get to your level. I'm just assuming it's level 3. It could be level 2 or whatever level. And think about your objectives as something that you will have to measure progress towards. And then there's going to be some strategies that you're going to have to deploy in order to get to the numbers. And for those strategies to be successful, you need to identify KPIs that'll allow you to monitor progress. And that's how you deploy that to your team. Your strategies and measures are going to become their objectives and goals and so on and so forth. The point, everybody needs to know what they're going to do. Everybody needs to know the role they play. And finally, what we said today, do not forget to make sure that you have a number of mechanisms that will allow you to track progress, to adjust as you go, to learn from the experience, leverage technology, make sure that you are realigning as you go. You will tend to veer, you in an organization are going to tend to veer off of road. Make sure that you don't. Very importantly, define early wins, define victories, celebrate them, excite your team. Every step of the way, you should think about, okay, so when do I get to my next win? Then define another win, then go for it. We spoke about Scrum as a methodology that defines mini sprints, goes for them, goes to the next one. And that's how you do it. My friend, with this, I'm going to get out of your hair. I'm going to give you time back because I already took it. And I wish you the best. Let me know in the comments, are there any questions? Are there any other things that you'd like me to revisit next week when we do Growth Bites again in our usual format, Q&A? Is there anything that you believe that I could help you chew on or shed some more light on? Don't be shy. Drop it here in the comments. Remember that I'm going to create a Slido link. Slido, remember, is this page where you can go and write your questions and vote on questions that are there. So write your questions there. And I'll see you again next week. Thank you for joining me. Thanks for bearing with my technical difficulties today and last week. And I'll look for the replay on LinkedIn and in YouTube and the other channels that you're going to see in the description as well. So with that, have a fantastic rest of the week. Successful January, which we're about to end. And I'll see you next week. Bye.